Good evening, Internet land. It's us. It's Coaching Unpacked. We are back. We are live over on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. I've got that working tonight. One day we'll hit the big time and maybe go live on Facebook for one, and all of our families can watch us talking about something they might not understand. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Sarah and Adam. How are you both? They're being very polite. If you're not watching the visual podcast, they both held out a loving hand to each other to say how each other's are.
Over to you. Well,
I am absolutely fine. There is nothing wrong. I'm just really hungry. I just had one of the days where I'm really hungry, and my husband is very kindly cooking dinner. I can smell it. Yeah, I'm hungry.
Brilliant.
Adam, however, has had a challenging week last week, didn't you?
I did. It was SATs week, which for any primary teacher, every primary teacher will know what that feels like. But it was good actually. It was good, but it's over now. Finished for another year, like Christmas, and now I'm back into a slightly more normal routine, except for the fact that my in-laws are here at the moment, all the way from France.
Oh, all the way. And how's that free-flowing conversation going?
It's going. They're within earshot at the moment.
So it's très bon, we could say.
That's right.
That's right. Very good. Well, before we get cracking on today's episode, I'm going to hold up this little doozy, this Impact magazine from Charter College, because the three of us are in it. We've got an article. Coaching and mental models for adaptive expertise. There's been loads of great feedback. I'm mega chuffed to have worked with you guys on that, and it's really cool. Some people have been saying they've been using it in their staff training already, and as we always say, we're very grateful for people who use what we've been thinking about to help further their work. And as ever, a massive shout out for her ladyship, Dame Professor Dr. Harley Hughes. We will always her full title, Sarah, this time. Thank you very much. So we are today talking about performance rehearsal and using rehearsal in coaching, which makes people really nervous. Not me, I'm a performer. So let's have a chat about what it is and why it might be powerful. So let's be specific. What is rehearsal? And Sarah, why is this important?
Yeah, brilliant. So rehearsal, which doesn't make you nervous, which is great, Chris. We wouldn't want to make you nervous today. But we can kind of divide it into two sort of areas, which I'll do in a minute. But first of all, rehearsal, Adam always says, start by defining it with what it's not. And it's not role play. It's not role play being a teacher because the teacher is a teacher. So it's kind of just getting up and being you in a low stakes environment. So it's practicing some element of teaching in a low stakes environment. What we mean by low stakes is that it's not having an impact on learning in that moment because you're doing it outside of the crazy lesson environment. And that has so many benefits because it enables you to practice something with a minimal cognitive load and to make mistakes and get some feedback and try again, etc., etc. And if you think about rehearsals having perhaps like two branches, and the first branch is that kind of performance rehearsal. So those are those kind of action steps that you might work on, which are about like doing something in your lesson as a teacher. For example, rehearsing a questioning technique or rehearsing a behavior management technique where you need to get up and actually kind of practice it as if you were in front of your students. And then down the other branch, we've got this planning rehearsal. So that's for action steps where you might be rehearsing a thought process to try to get a kind of habit of mind. For example, when I was working at Teach First, we used to work a lot with teachers on planning backwards from learning goals because they used to plan these really quote unquote fun activities, but they weren't kind of linked to the learning goals. So we should practice that kind of habit of mind. You might practice creating a hinge question. You might practice planning an explanation, etc., etc. So there's lots of things you can practice planning. And for that, you don't plan standing up at your board in your classroom, you're usually kind of sitting down and you are practicing a thought process. So we've got those performance ones and we've got the planning ones. But today we're going to focus on those kind of performance action steps. So talk us through, Adam, why we think rehearsal might be important.
So we think, like, overall rehearsal, we think the rehearsal is pretty important because some people say it builds habits. Now, whether there's a little bit of contention, I guess, around like whether the actual act of rehearsal builds habits, or whether the act of rehearsal kind of, Sarah says, like, prepares the tracks for the habits to kind of run down. So does rehearsal actually build the habit, or does it sort of create the groove that repeated practice of that particular technique then slips nicely into, and it is what, through grooving, the habit starts to build and form. Rehearsal helps you groove.
Listen, sign me up.
So like, overall, we think like that's like a headline of like why it's effective. And there's quite a bit of literature to back it up. So one of my favorite pieces of literature, I guess, that makes this point, although I call it favorite piece of literature, I'm still not 100% convinced that I know how to say the name of the lead researcher, but Mancenido et al. From 2023. So they did a really, really cool study where they took 3 groups of teachers. So if you can sort of imagine a table split into 3, it's probably the best way to kind of get this. So group 1, they had conceptual based training. So that basically involved those teachers reading some material about effective classroom practice, particular pedagogical techniques and approaches. Then they reflected on them, and then they made like a commitment to act. So they'd read about a particular approach, reflect on it and discuss it, and then they'd go, I'm going to commit to changing this thing about my practice going forward. So they called that conceptual based training. Then group 2 had practice based training. So that was, they watched a video of effective practice. They then deconstructed what made that video of effective practice effective and kind of hypothesized what it was that the teachers were doing that made it effective. And then they rehearsed doing what those teachers in that video were doing. Then there was a third group, and they sort of did a bit of a mix, really. So they did some reading, the same as group 1, and a little bit of reflection on that. And then they did the deconstruction of the video. So they watched the same videos as group 2, and they kind of deconstructed what made those videos really good. But the key thing is that they didn't do any practice-based training. Now, like, what the results, they sort of looked at the results in 2 separate ways. They said, they looked at it and went, well, which of these 3 things is best at helping teachers know what to do? And when you look at the results on that, the mixed approach and the practice-based approach are just about equal, but still better than the conceptual-based training alone. Then when you look at the results in terms of what's most effective at getting teachers to make better decisions when unexpected events happen in classrooms, the practice-based training outperforms the other 2 by a mile. And what's really important about that is it's the unexpected bit that is the key. Teaching is full of unexpected things happening. So that's a really, really important piece of that research, that it really kind of zoomed in on that element of it. So yeah, that's just one study. There are many more, but it's one that really resonates with me, and one that we think kind of really points towards rehearsal being something we should definitely know more about.
Yeah, I think I've got 2 points from that, and anybody who's just saw, if you're watching this live, we've just put up the link actually to the paper you were just talking about. But for the podcast, we'll make sure the link in the paper is in the show notes. Just, we've got GCSEs going on at the moment, and they're all getting in for 8 o'clock. They're all, trying to do this kind of overlearning at the moment, cramming, and actually I'm getting them to do rehearsal by proxy kind of thing of just saying some keywords out loud and writing them down and getting some really maybe some key points or equations or thematic ideas. And then they come back and go, I used all of them because they've done it and they've practiced it. They've set up, like you say, they've set up the tracks for deliberate practice, I guess. I think, trying to be a little bit devil's advocate, it's, the rehearsal isn't real. And it can and does feel very awkward for people, no matter how many times you say to someone, this isn't role play, because you are a teacher, so it isn't role play. They will go straight back to year 9 drama class where they had to introduce themselves, go, my name's Tony. Pointed to my toe, my knee there, but you can see, or my name is, you know who I am, and everyone starts to go, can't do it. Why should they push through? For people who are sitting there going, absolutely not. You are not getting me doing that in front of people. How can they push through? Why should they push through?
I think that's really important, because there's two different questions there, and I think they're both brilliant. So like the how and the why is the differences. I think the why is because it's the inauthenticity of it is actually really important. Like Sarah says a lot, it quotes Grossman et al. Quite a lot around saying that it's that rehearsal is about calming the waters, or practicing kayaking in calm waters, right? And that's what good kayakers do. They practice when the waters are calm, so they can kind of automate and build the habits around the routines that they then want to use in the uncalm and messy environment of like the rapids, I guess. And that's the same with teaching. If we practice it where the waters are calm and the stakes are low, i.e. in a coaching session, then when we put that teacher back into the complex, messy environment of a classroom, it's likely that the routine that they've practiced when the waters were calm are going to be the thing they're going to fall back on. So if they're falling back on that pretty solid routine, it then means that their cognitive capacity can be more devoted towards dealing with all of the idiosyncrasies of that particular moment, all of those unexpected variables that only appear in that particular context in that particular time. So I think like the why is it important? Why is it worthwhile persisting with, even though it's not real? I think the answer to that is because like the fact that it's not real is really important. And loads of other professions, performance professions, do it. If you look at athletes, musicians, as you'll know, doctors, they all rehearse. Why do they rehearse? Because they know that they want that habit to be there they want the habit to be the thing that they fall back on in the moment where it really, really counts, in competition, in surgery, in performance. And it's exactly the same in teaching. We want to automate as much as we possibly can the effective techniques that we know, so that when we're in the moment, we can then pay attention to all of those little nuanced details. It's exactly the same as what those other professions are doing.
You made a really nice point though, Adam, about the stakes of those other professions though, didn't you? You were saying that like athletes and doctors, for example, like if they don't practice, they could lose the race of a lifetime in the Olympics, let's say, or they could, maim someone or kill someone, which is pretty high stakes and
less than ideal.
Less, definitely. And you'd expect that your surgeon had done this thing before, or if not, was practiced many times on a non-living thing and now had supervision on you. So like you'd expect at least that. So you talk about those stakes, Adam, but you also said something really nice about, well, yes, teaching doesn't feel as high stakes, does it? Because touch wood, no one dies, and you're not losing the race of a lifetime necessarily. But you talked about the cumulative effect of, not great teaching over time, and how that can scupper the life chances of students. And so, I thought that was a really powerful point, that like, whilst it doesn't seem like a huge thing in comparison to those other professions, it's actually, we know the difference between a great teacher and a not so great teacher is months and months of progress that a child could be making. And I also want to come back to your point there around like the paper that you cited, whose name I'm not going to butcher, but the paper that you just discussed, and like say that rehearsal like has been critiqued for like just building like robotic teachers who can just do robotic techniques. But the paper that was so groundbreaking because it showed that actually rehearsal can improve the ability to adapt and make better decisions. And what we've been talking about in the impact paper that Chris kind of was talking about at the beginning is this idea that like decision making is underpinned by mental models. So we see that rehearsal is probably improving teachers' mental models, which is their understanding of how a situation works and how they should deal with it, and when things change, what they should do as well. So yes, it creates those grooves, but it's also allowing for flexibility. So it seems to us like this kind of win-win, basically.
What I really like is this codification of things that some teachers out there will be going, I do that. Oh, I already do that. I was panicking that I was not doing that, but maybe I am. And, you know, I've worked with a lot of teachers, and the very best ones go, I can only give it 80% today. And I'm like, your 80% is everybody's 100. Like, and when you look back on it and you think, what am I actually trying to say? I'm trying to say that the mental models that you used for your adaptive expertise in the moment are so good. Your kayaking in calm waters is so instinctive that if you do need to take your foot off the gas slightly and just be like, I'm not feeling very well, or something's going on in my personal life and I cannot leave it at the door, then actually this kind of the deliberate practice of the teachers that is just there, we can build that to be really, really good without them having that extra kind of cognitive load. I just find it fascinating. But let's see some of this in action. And just before you set us up, for everybody watching live, we are going dangerous. We're going rogue, and we're going to play a video live. We'll see if that works. And if you are listening to this in the car, what I would recommend you do is when you get back home, jump to where are we? We're about 17 minutes in. Jump over onto either Spotify on your computer or over onto YouTube, where this visualized podcast will be, and you'll be able to see the video. You'll be able to hear Adam and Sarah, but it's not really them, it's them from the past. So let's set us up for what we're gonna watch, Adam.
Can I just very, very, very quickly, and then I promise we'll get to that. But like this point as well that Sarah made about teachers, like the cumulative effect of good teaching. Let's frame it like that. A really good paper for looking at that as well is Craft and Pape. I think that's 2014. Sarah, is that right?
I think so.
Like that's another really good paper to look at for anyone that's interested in like that cumulative effect. So yeah, okay. So in this video, so I'm the coach and I'm coaching Sarah on using cold call questioning. So these are how to define cold calling. So essentially, asking a question through the use of cold calling is asking a question to everybody and then naming a student who you want to answer that question without kind of taking hands up or volunteers to ask for that question. So you'd use cold calling. The main reason people use cold calling is to hold all students accountable for listening and for thinking as well. I think that's often missed, is that it's about holding students accountable for thinking. In that pause that you leave after the question is asked, the message that's being sent there is, I'm giving you this time and space to do the thinking before I then call on one person for a response. So we've chosen to show you coaching on cold call because it's something that people will probably be quite familiar with. So you can focus on the coaching rather than the technique itself. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, what we're saying is that this is flexible enough to be used with all techniques. So yeah, Sarah, do you want to just talk a little bit about the techniques that people are going to see?
Yeah, so we've got obviously we're using technique in two ways here. Technique as in like the cold call technique that you're going to watch Adam coach me on. But also we, in our upcoming book with Dr. Heidi Hughes, are writing about coaching for adaptive expertise. And we've tried to codify coaching because we're like, coaches need techniques too to work on. They need to look back at their own coaching or have someone else support them on their coaching who can identify techniques and talk about how to do them better and use them in better ways, or, give them some reinforcement around the way they're using these techniques. So we've really tried to codify coaching. So when you watch this video or if you're listening, when you're listening in, then you will hear some particular techniques that Adam is using. And I just want to flag what they are ahead of watching this video. So the first one is plan for rehearsal. So you will hear Adam getting me to plan for the cold call rehearsal, planning what my question's going to be, planning how long I'm going to pause for, etc. So I plan each success criteria of this cold call action step, and I'm gonna plan each of them first, and that helps rehearsal go really smoothly. Secondly, he scaffolds it for me because I am a nervous teacher. So he helps me by kind of scaffolding it and supporting me. So listen out for that. He gives me just-in-time feedback. So that's another technique where he pauses me mid-rehearsal to give me a little nudge to do one of the success criteria. He gets me to go again multiple times, another technique. And he adds some complexity at the end because I can handle it. So as you're listening, those are the techniques: plan for rehearsal, scaffold rehearsal, just-in-time feedback, go again, and add complexity that you'll hear. And you'll also hear him spotlight specific things that I do well or need to work on. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I am going to hit play on our video so you can enjoy some performance rehearsal.
Just to recap the success criteria: question, then name, pause for an appropriate amount of time after questioning, scan, really obviously, and take that step back. Okay, so before we dive in, then let's plan for rehearsal. So when would you be cold calling in an upcoming lesson?
So next lesson, I'm doing a bit of a recap on the effects of the writer's use of metaphor. So I'll do some questioning around that, where I want everyone thinking hard about it.
Yeah, great. Okay, and what question will you ask within that?
I'll ask, what is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? And I know which sentence I mean.
Great. Okay, so let's write that down so that we don't forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and that first success criteria is about putting the name after the question. So who are you going to ask?
I'll ask Gary, I think. So I'll say, what is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary?
Brilliant. Okay, what's the most appropriate amount of time to get the thinking that you want from the class and get Gary's best answer?
So after seeing your model, it's actually probably longer than I think. So I think I'm going to go for 5 seconds.
Okay, yeah, so let's just try that out. Let's pause for 5 seconds then and see how that feels. Okay, ready? That's about 5 seconds there.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's time to think, but they're not going to find the question so hard that they need longer than that. So I think 5 seconds is good. Okay, so looking at the success criteria then, I need to use my really obvious scanning that we've worked on, and I need to step back when I say Gary's name. Step away from Gary, yeah.
That's right, that's right. Oh, okay, let's give it a go.
Okay, I'll be honest, I'm really nervous about doing this. It's not you, it's just not wanting to get it wrong.
Ah, well, like wrong isn't important, but nervous is, right? So what is it that you're particularly nervous about doing or not doing?
It's that thing about making sure the name goes after the question. I really get why it's so important, but I think I'm going to fall back into old habits.
Yeah, and like it's really important to acknowledge that risk and be aware of that risk as well. The best way to build new habits is to start to kind of create the grooves that those habits will fall into over time. And the best way to do that is to get to a point where we rehearse in a way that is as close to reality as possible. We don't necessarily need to start with that. So let's start with just like a few repetitions of the question you want to ask and the name that you're going to put after it. Let's just do that sitting down at first as well. And maybe if I say it to begin with, and then you can pick up from there with the script in front of you.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Yeah, let's do that.
So what's the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary?
What's the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary?
Really nice, really nice. What's the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary?
What's the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary?
Great. One more time.
What's the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary.
Really, really good and super smooth. And I don't know if you noticed as well, but your pauses on your first run were actually was better than the pause that I put in on my first run as well. So yeah, really, really good stuff. Give it a try stood up now, but keep the script with you. So if you need to read it before you start, just do that.
Okay. What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? Gary.
Yeah, it's really good, really good. Delivery of that question was really, really confident. So now try and go again, but without the script, so you feel a little bit more natural.
Okay. What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? Gary.
Right, okay, right. Ready to put it all together?
Yes. Okay. What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence?
Hold on 1 second. I'm just jumping in really quickly. Remember to scan really deliberately.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? Gary.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, really deliberate scanning. Let's go one more time from the top, and this time stringing it all together.
What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? Gary.
Really great. And again.
What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? Gary.
That was really, really clearly delivered. So you had the pause, the scanning was really deliberate. So I felt like I was like genuinely having my attention checked really clearly. You've nailed that really quickly, right? So let's add something in. So okay. You said that your goal is for all students to be held accountable for thinking. So what do you want the class doing after you say Gary and step back?
I want them listening to Gary's answer.
Right, okay, so there's a danger that they'll switch off because they haven't been called. Then what sometimes happens is we ask a follow-up question to another child, and the child that we ask hasn't listened to Gary's answer, and so they can't build on it or challenge it. So what we need to do is encourage them to listen to the speaker, which I know is something that you've worked on previously as well. So how do you usually do that?
So we've worked on saying tracking so-and-so. So instead of saying, what's the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence, Gary, I could say tracking Gary.
Nice. Okay, right. Let's give that a go then.
What is the purpose of the metaphor in this sentence? Tracking Gary.
Brilliant. Right, so I thought that worked really well. You even put in this tiny little pause after the word tracking, which I thought was really effective because I could prepare to track whoever it was that you asked because of that pause. So do you feel like that moves you closer to your goal? And if you do, in what way does it move you closer?
Yeah, it definitely does, because it makes it really hard for anyone to not think at any point during that questioning. And now we've extended it so that they're thinking about the question and they are listening to and hopefully thinking about Gary's answer.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Right. There is so much coaching to unpack then. First of all, I've got to say, Sarah, you're a very marvelous actress. The nervousness you had then, it was brilliant. I was like, oh my God, she's just started. She's a complete newbie. And the way you counted like this, it was so cute. As well, I do have to let everybody know that if you weren't here at the beginning of the podcast, Sarah's hubby's making her dinner, and so you may have heard some Fantasia type banging and scrapings. But listen, no, we are a real world podcast. Like, we are teachers. We've got home from work. Stuff's happening, right? It's 10 to 8 at night. Before we crack on, just want to give a shout out to Mr. Taylor Maths 2, who is one of our biggest supporters, and he's really sad that he missed the start of the episode, but I said I'd give him a shout out because why not. Right, let's get back to your you're coaching. I think the benefits are immediate. So even though, and you have the kind of the really experienced teachers or some of the people that call this out as going, what on earth is this? I've experienced those conversations. Because even though saying a question and putting a name last on the paper is quite straightforward, and we've got these little bits of success criteria, I particularly love the bit where you were stepping back to take in the whole room. That was quite powerful. The character of Sarah and poor Gary, Sarah really needed to rehearse that and to overwrite any previous behaviour that she admitted was kind of there. So actually her repeating it wasn't weird because it was just kind of developing muscle memory. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of advantages to that kind of to the technique of go again. So like the first reason is because it's about building someone's confidence and kind of building them up to like feeling in the flow and feeling in that moment. So if you notice at the start, it starts off, and it's a little bit of scaffolding rehearsal as well, but that thing of like, I say it, you say it, I say it, you say it, now you say it again, now you say it again, right, now you stand up, do it, and again, and again, and again. And just every single time Sarah's doing it, she's kind of reinforcing her own belief in herself that she's going to do it, that she can do it, and she can do it well. And then I guess linked to that, it's this idea of behaviour change. And behaviour change, we know, is really, really, really difficult. And Sarah has talked a lot recently about a paper, I think, is it by Deutschmann or is it just a German
German man
researcher? I don't know if I've just Deutschmann, it's just by a German man and I've just named him Deutschmann. I think it is. I think that is the name of the researcher.
That's the I got this from Harry Fletcher Wood quotes this like article that discusses this research paper. So it's about sort of third hand, but it's called like Change or Die.
Yeah,
and it's basically based on some research that people undergoing surgery, I think they had like the kidneys removed or something, were told like unless you change your eating habits, you will die. And most people did not change their eating habits 12 months on. So even when faced with death, people don't seem to change their habits. So I think, sorry, I'll let you go back.
No, but was it Deutschmann or was it a Deutscher man?
I'll let you know.
I don't know.
Harry. But yeah, I suppose ultimately the message of that is behaviour change is really, really difficult. Don't ever, ever underestimate it. And like, it's probably best, and this is again something Sarah said before, is that like assume people won't change. And
assume inertia. Literally, this is just like you must assume that everything you say is like not going to make a difference unless you have a completely concerted, evidence-informed effort at changing behaviour. That is just, you must think like that as a teacher educator.
I love the certainty about that. And our 108 people who are watching us right now, I hope they've taken that.
That's true. Yeah. It's just true.
And they're running with it because you had vibrant hands and your nails then, which match your jumper, by the way.
Because just let everybody can think about a New Year's resolution.
Ugh,
and then think about 2 months later when it statistically has fallen by the wayside.
I hate their very existence, and anybody who does a New Year's resolution immediately goes on my red list.
This has become really impassioned from both of you, isn't it?
Sorry, Adam, we interrupted you multiple times. I'm so sorry. Carry on.
That's because we have an instinct that Adam goes to the gym on the morning of the 1st of January. I can tell.
I'm there on Christmas Day. But yeah, I suppose like ultimately with that, if you take all of that in, well, what does that actually tell us about rehearsal then? About this particular technique of go again. It tells us that ultimately going again is never going to do any harm. Like we really need to make the behaviour change something that we practice again and again. And Doug Lemov talks about practicing beyond perfect. And I think that's a really, really nice way of putting that, you know. There was a couple of times in that clip where I said to Sarah, okay, again, even though she'd already done it pretty well. And in actual fact, I said to Sarah a few times, one more time, and then proceeded to ask her to do it about 8 more times after that.
Yes.
So again, it's that thing of practice beyond perfect.
If you're in the performing arts world, so anybody out there who's ever had a dance class, the greatest liar there has ever existed is the choreographer. Just one more time. 5, 6, 7, 8. Well done. Just one more time. My wife does that. Just one more time. And then they have to go off and dance again. And they're like, she's lying to us.
Adam does. Like, he shows me. I watch genuine clips of his coaching, and the amount of times he goes, "Oh, just one more time," like casually, and 50 times later, that person's like,
Adam, you're a coaching choreographer.
"You are." You're...
That sounds good.
But I was interested, actually, Chris, in like you talked about it not being real earlier on, and what did you see that as an issue when you were watching it, or how did that play out for you?
Well, initially no, because your performance was Oscar worthy. You two are. This is terrifying. I mean, it is weird in a way, but Adam used the technique that I think we were calling scaffolding rehearsal really well. So it eased you into it, and he was just really supportive and positive throughout. Even the kind of the just in time feedback, which is a bit like being interrupted, which is rude. We're British, for our international listeners. We mustn't interrupt each other. But if you set them up, and you've got a working relationship with them and a coaching relationship where they know that you might do just in time feedback, and you've explained why it's crucial that we don't make the mistake there. I do the very same thing when I'm musically directing a show. If I get to a bit they keep getting wrong, and it's in the middle of a really, really big solo, or everyone's singing, working their bottoms off, and it's wrong, stop. I'm not going to let them get to the end and have embedded that mistake with the positive feeling of how that felt. We need to go back and fix it now, and I'll fix it. For me, I'll fix it in really minute detail, and they'll be like, "Oh, you stopped our flow." Well, good, because I didn't want your flow to involve that. So ultimately, I can see that it's just going to take time, and that's fine, because kind of time is what we have. That's what we have as teachers. I know everybody goes, "I've not got the time. There's too much curriculum," but if you're building in this kind of coaching program into your school, as I'm looking to with some of the work that I'm doing accidentally and now more deliberately as I've kind of grown through all of this, I can just see it. I can see the benefit being completely overwhelming. I think if Sarah, if Coachee Sarah had have sat with Adam and learnt all of that stuff and understood it, and you'd written down a script, I think you'd have walked into that classroom, and I think you'd have held that book, and I think you'd have been, with no offence intended, a gibbering wreck. I think you would have been completely overloaded. It would have been a bit of a mess, and the kids would be like, "Have we got Ofsted in? This is really weird. Why is my teacher being strange?" You've got to introduce these slowly to the kids as well, and you just turning up and kind of, I mean, poor Gary, you just turning up and going, "Hello," and they're going, "What's the use of the metaphor in this sentence?" 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Gary, and then jumping back. You thought there might be a bomb or something. Like you can't just drop that on them. Adam, does that make any sense? That's my takeaway from it.
Yeah, it definitely makes perfect sense. Like those calm waters are really, really important for learning a new idea, aren't they? Like Sarah, how did it feel to have that complexity added at the end as the person being coached on that?
Yeah, and we thought really carefully about this, Adam, didn't we, with the scripting? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the right complexity? And the coach does have to come up with it. So just to say, first of all, it's not always right to add complexity, but Coachee Sarah got it reasonably quickly and seemed quite comfortable despite her like nervousness. So Adam added that complexity. So sometimes it is right to add that complexity, but it has to be really plausible complexity. So really nice addition is to say, well, hang on, what happens next? So they've all thought hard about this question, but common problem is they switch off as soon as you say Gary, and no one listens to Gary. And then you always have this super frustrating thing where you're like, so how can you build on Gary's answer, please, Chris? And Chris is like, yeah, no, I didn't listen.
Who's Gary?
I just said, who's Gary? there is no child now called Gary. Yes. Sorry to the Garys, children Garys out there. so like a really plausible problem. And Adam makes the point that like a plausible, like it's like a sort of a plausible, slightly unpredictable thing sometimes, of like you ask a question and someone's going to give you an answer you didn't expect. But that unpredictability is still something that will happen in your practice, and that's why we're practicing it. It's not the mad thing where a pigeon flies into your lesson, which does sometimes happen, but you're not going to rehearse for it because it's very rare. And like Adam makes the point of like, how do you rehearse for that anyway? So it's like a sort of a plausible, slightly unpredictable next step. But we kind of see this in different ways. So it's like, it could be the kid that answers the question in a strange way. It could be that they don't behave the way that you ask them to behave. So how do you follow up? Or it could be, hang on, you're going to go into next lesson and we're practicing this modelling action step. And let's pretend that actually when you go into the lesson next lesson, you do a check for understanding 10 minutes before and no one understands. How are you then going to model? So it's actually, a learning thing that's changed how you do it. So there's various ways that you can add complexity. I felt that this wasn't complexity for complexity's sake. This took me on to the next step.
Yeah.
And I think it worked really well for kind of building my mental model there. Just one more point. Chris talked about earlier how like Sarah really needed this rehearsal. Like she was going to really struggle and probably looked like she dropped a grenade on Gary and
jumped back.
But this rehearsal is useful for any teacher at any stage because you're always working on an action step that's slightly outside of your comfort zone. So I just want to say that, like, I don't believe that rehearsal is only useful for like newer teachers or less experienced teachers. You'll always be working on something. And unless we can hold our hands up and honestly say that we think teachers are done learning at some point, which due to complexity is probably never going to happen, then I think there's benefits for everybody.
I can see that this really is only going to work ever. And I've said this from Coaching Unpacked episode 1, if there is a carefully curated agreement between the coach and the coachee. So what about those planning action steps through coaching the teacher on planning an explanation or a set of questions? You don't need to stand up and rehearse that necessarily. So Adam, how might that work?
Well, I'm not going to answer that because that is...
Sorry, I should have done that. And how is that going to work?
Gary.
Adam.
Very good. So you can learn from just watching us.
I'm not going to answer it because we'll just do it as the topic of our next episode, shall we?
Gorgeous. I love that. That sounds excellent. Well, thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. What we've had nearly 45 minutes of really interesting conversation. I've had a great time. You two are delightful as ever. We had some successful tech. I'll edit it down into the podcast. It'll absolutely be cool. Listen, if you're out there and you're a member of the Charter College, grab your copy of Impact, which is upside down, but I don't care because we've got our article in there. Adam and Sarah with Hailey are writing a book on, well, I think it's going to change the landscape. I'm very excited. And it's been great for so many people, 120 of you right now watching us. So good evening. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your evening with, well, Sarah, because why wouldn't you? And Adam, of course, master coach, and me in this kind of slightly silky black and white number that I was today for school. And yeah.
For anybody that's not, imagine if you're not watching this live and you hear Chris say, me in this black and white silky number. It's like loads of different variations of what people come up with in their minds for that. I reckon.
Yeah,
well, jump on YouTube and watch the video.
That's why you need to watch us on YouTube and on Spotify. Otherwise, this will be an 11 p.m. episode of Coaching Undressed, which I think is slightly different. Sarah and Adam, thank you so much for a brilliant episode, and thank you to everyone who is watching and listening. And we'll catch you all next time on Coaching Unpacked.
Yeah, we'll see you at 11, Chris, for coaching.
I'm going to go now. I'm going to get ready. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye.